Hey, I'm Brataki, and this is my first installment to my devlogs. At first, I was wanting to make everything from scratch, make it original, be proud that I hand created everything. You'll see very quickly of how I got over that, because I see a lot of advice on when I was watching other people's videos, watching other people's devlogs. Every now and then they'll mention it that it's okay to use assets and buy assets, and I really understand that now after going through this. For my first game, which might be a little big for just starting out, I wanted to create a 2D roguelike. Part of it, I wanted to procedurally generate worlds and levels, and I might have gone in a little bit over my head. It's not necessarily the easiest thing. Maybe it's not advised for beginners to go into, but I did my best and I was following tutorials. I tried to follow tutorials. The first thing I did was create rooms I could turn into prefabs in Photoshop for the generation, just so I could get a handle on how it works before I do too much on the art part. Plus, it's just going to be a little placeholder prototype kind of thing. This is my second attempt in trying to create these prefabs in Photoshop. The first time I created one of the borders too large, and rotating them to create the new prefabs, it caused an issue where there was a gap in between the walls and the border. So I had to delete all of those, restart, and this is my second time through with creating these prefabs, and I was pretty proud of them. With this, I was optimistic and loaded up Unity to see my prefabs, and what do you know? I screwed up. I missed a pixel, and they are not up to what I want them to be. Unfortunately, the whole point in creating these in Photoshop was so I could skip creating prefabs in Unity where I had to drag out blocks, and I thought that would take forever. So instead, I took the scenic route and created two sets of prefabs that are unusable. Of course, my computer could have been wrong, so I tried it again. I scrapped the whole idea of creating prefabs in Photoshop. So I completely went for the Blackthorn Prod tutorial route, and I'm hand creating these with the 3D objects. Before even building it, I ran into the issue of the grid snap. I don't know what it was. I was so confused, couldn't figure it out, and I wanted to tough it through, do it the Chad way, and not look up a tutorial for it. So I sat here for like 5 minutes, clicking things until it just worked. Eventually I got it. After overcoming my toughest battle, I finally got to start creating my prefabs. So I built it block by block, made the whole room, and before I even made a room, I created a base to where I could quickly copy it, paste it, delete what I don't need, and save that as a prefab. And I thought it was a pretty good process that I came up with. Not to toot my own horn, but it was my most impressive accomplishment, second only to figuring out the grid snap. I ended up realizing I got ahead of myself. I should have watched the whole tutorial video first and then started. Yeah, I kind of just started, and I figured out that I needed to include some empty objects with spawn points so I could actually spawn the rooms. And this led to my newfound love of prefabs, where if you edit the root and even your variants will get those edits. So when I added my spawn points into my base, my variants also got those, and I was ecstatic to see this happen because I did by accident, for one, and two, I didn't have to do any extra work. Next, I got into the coding, and I quickly ran into issues where my code doesn't work, which is normal, so it's not surprising. And I figured out that I skipped a whole section of the tutorial because I was distracted trying to build the room, which explains why I was missing a few things, which this ended up reinforcing my love for the lovely prefabs, where I had to I had to tag my spawn points as spawn points so that where my code reads the game object looking for spawn points. You can actually find them and know where to put the rooms. Turns out it did not solve the issue. So instead of dealing with my problems and fixing it, I decided to sleep on it and work on it again the next day, so that maybe being well rested, I could solve the problem. Starting a new day, well rested, I found out that I also had to identify the spawn points with a number, so I knew what room to spawn so that the doors connected correctly. The short answer is my code worked. The long answer is I gotta redo everything again. And I realized that because something was wrong in my code, it was actually infinitely spawning them. So I would have to end the task in the task manager if I actually wanted to restart in a decent time. I ended up adding a limiter as well to the loop, so I had a better chance of not infinitely spawning rooms. He pinned a comment of how there was a mistake in this code because it worked for him, but it wouldn't work for most other people. And so I removed it, made it look a bit closer, but I still had to redo prefabs. You may have noticed that I've had to redo my prefabs quite a bit, and this has made me realize the importance of naming conventions, because editing my footage, trying to find and order my footage together correctly, when everything's called redoing prefabs, doesn't make it easy. So make sure you have good naming conventions. Getting back to my prefabs, I realized that how the spawn points are is uneven, so it's kind of skewed the origin of my prefabs. And so I added an empty object, added a border with a plane, and thought this would center my origin, and it'll make my generation work. As it turns out, it doesn't work. So now I am down to my last option. Before that, it felt good taking my anger out and deleting everything. For my last plan, I had it all figured out. I took a trip to the Unity Asset Store, and I looked up procedural generation. I had a couple engines I liked and might use in the future. I added those to my cart, and I bought them. This helped me get over the possible future issues on wanting to create everything from scratch and running into time crunch if that ever happened. But this made me realize that instead of spending 2 entire nights on procedural generation, I could have just pulled a Mark Cuban, went to my neighbors, sold some trash bags, come back, do 0 coding, and still have an engine. So yeah, I imported it to my project, and the procedural generation coding for my project is officially done. I went through them a little bit just to see the samples of what they had to offer. Now all I have next is to learn how to use these and to generate my own. And this is my experience as a beginner developer developing procedural generation. Thank you for watching my first devlog where I overcome multiple struggles. And if you want to see more, feel free to subscribe, leave a comment, let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.